In the late 1940s, Alan Turing proposed that machines could learn through education and experience, guided by rewards and feedback. Today, from defeating the world's best Go players to teaching robots to adapt on the fly, reinforcement learning has transformed the landscape of artificial intelligence. Join us as we hear from Andrew Barto and Richard Sutton, the 2024 ACM A.M. Turing Award recipients, for developing the conceptual and algorithmic foundations of reinforcement learning.
When I was an undergraduate at the University of Michigan, I stumbled upon a little book in the library called Brains, Machines, and Mathematics, written by Michael Arbib, and I was impressed that maybe I didn't have to choose one of those to study. I could study all three. After I received my PhD, I heard of a postdoctoral position at the University of Massachusetts. They had a project that was initiated by a physiologist named Harry Clough, and he had the idea that theories of intelligence were wrong, and I was hired as a postdoc on this project. I don't know how long after that Rich Sutton came as a graduate student.
I was at Stanford. I was reading everything in the library about artificial intelligence, trying to do learning, and learning was totally unpopular, out of fashion in AI. And I read the literature, and the literature was a little bit unsatisfying because there's all kinds of supervised learning, but it always seemed to me there should be something more. And it was obvious from the point of view of psychology that there should be something more. Finally, I found Harry's report. Totally just an undergraduate student at Stanford, and he's this guy who wrote the report that I found in the library, but I would guess I was brash enough to just write him a letter. Anyway, it all worked out. Within the year, I was Massachusetts with Andy.
So machine learning people study several different kinds of problems. One is called supervised learning, which is learning from labeled examples. There's so-called unsupervised learning, which is learning from unlabeled examples. So reinforcement learning is different from both of those. The examples are not labeled by what the desired response of the system should be, but the output, the response of the system, is evaluated by, say, a reward or a penalty, or by a number, a score, and learning attempts to maximize that score, or to get the most pleasure, if you will.
It's like night and day. Supervised learning, it's like you're memorizing cue cards. Someone's given you the answers, you have to just remember them. Self-directed learning, reinforcement learning, the agent has to figure it out. It has to try things and figure out what's the right one. Much more powerful process. That's what intelligence is. Intelligence is figuring out how the world works rather than waiting for someone to tell you how the world works.
In those early days, there was a lot of thinking along the lines of reinforcement learning. Minsky's thesis, there was also the famous Samuel's checkers player. It was a reinforcement learning system. You know, it was our concern with history that really enriched the kind of thing we were doing, and we felt like pioneers because those ideas had kind of been abandoned. We thought they were abandoned prematurely.
Maybe it's obvious to everybody that learning is an important part of intelligence, but strangely, it wasn't obvious to AI researchers at that time. All the animals, if Andy Barto was here, he would tell me to be careful about my superlatives. Almost all the animals have classical and instrumental conditioning. These ended up being the two things that we formalized as engineering endeavors. Instrumental learning became sort of what we usually think of as simple reinforcement learning, learning from rewards and penalties, and classical conditioning ends up being temporal difference learning, where you learn to predict.
Exploration, exploitation, dilemma. I think it's a key principle. In our algorithms, exploitation is using what you know or what you think you know. That's exploiting your current state of knowledge. But it's maybe wrong or incomplete, and so you need to explore because you may learn something to augment your so-called knowledge base. So these reinforcement learning systems do that. In fact, they use randomness to try things. You know, it's a trial and error process.
The biggest impacts of reinforcement learning have yet to come. Probably the biggest one that has come would be AlphaGo. I remember watching the Go masters at the time analyzing the position when AlphaGo made that move, and they said, ooh, that's a mistake. Then over time, it became clear that it was actually a really good move.
I mean, one thing that I think was very exciting, the same algorithms are related to dynamic programming, which is what Rich Sutton's thesis was about, that algorithm is very closely related to how the brain's dopamine system works. And I think now this connection to the TD algorithm has actually heavily influenced the neuroscience of mammalian reward systems. And so we explored this idea and came across a lot of things that were surprising. Then we wrote a bunch of papers, some of which were good.
Looking ahead, there's the opportunity to fulfill the dream of reinforcement learning, which is learning from experience. The reinforcement learning agent is employing the scientific method to understand its world, build a model of its world. What are we doing? We're trying to build a model of our world. Reinforcement learning is our attempt to understand ourselves, how our minds work, how we understand the world. I think that's what makes it so exciting.